Hi everyone, happy Friday and welcome to Live Weather Impact on WCNC Plus. I'm meteorologist Brittany Van Voorhees. Yesterday, I feel like I was the least popular person on social media, honestly, because talking about this snowfall potential or lack thereof has just been crazy over the last few days. If anybody is watching here on WCNC Plus, just remember this show is an opportunity for us to talk about the weather a little bit more in depth to you, talk about national weather stories, and kind of give you the behind the scenes look at what goes into our daily forecast. I myself would personally love to see a little bit of snow. I know not everybody agrees with that, but I grew up in Atlanta, so we have relatively similar winters to this here in the Charlotte area, and I would like some snow. This weekend, back in 2022, we were looking at the potential for 2 to 4 inches here in Charlotte. That was really the last big time that we had a big snow, so 4 years ago. And I mean, I would like some personally. I just don't think that this is going to be our time. So if you're watching this and you thought that my forecast was lower than others, just remember too, at the end of the day, the idea is to get it right, not necessarily put out an early forecast, a week, 2 weeks in advance and end up being wrong. I'm working to be as accurate as possible. And as always, earn your trust. So let's talk about this weekend. Charlotte area potential snow. Maximum likely going to be a trace for our area. That does not mean that we won't see some snowflakes. We could see some flurries, but as Tim and I were talking about yesterday on this show, it is not going to be a snowstorm. It's more of a snow chance, and we're probably not making snowballs, snowmen, and having snowball fights. Although I'm sure Tim would love to throw a snowball at me, honestly, with the things that he has to deal with working with me on this show. But temperatures out there right now starting to get pretty chilly. We're at 43 degrees in Charlotte, still right around the upper 20s for the mountains. Still a bit of a wind chill factor right now, as we do have winds at about 10 miles an hour. Now that did have us in an elevated fire danger risk earlier today. Thankfully that has lowered because we're seeing lower winds over the next 24 hours. So not as much of an issue expected heading into the day tomorrow. Snow or no? I think that's kind of the $1 million question here in the Charlotte area. If we see anything, it'll be on Sunday, late morning, midday. I really genuinely do not think we're going to see a lot of impacts with this, and it's not just because we have lesser snowfall potential. It's also because of the timing this is happening. Remember that we're going into a long weekend. Many people are off of work, school on Monday. So even if we were to see a better chance of accumulation, it's really not going to impact as many people being on the roadways Sunday night or Monday. You also have to think about the time here. Late morning, midday. This isn't happening overnight, so this is not something people are going to wake up and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect this to happen. So thankfully that means lesser impacts, but again, I'm just trying to give you the forecast as to what I think is the most likely to happen, not trying to bum anybody out or make anybody upset. And I do not have kids yet, but I have a niece and nephew who are 4 and 1, and I know that it's kind of a bummer. So Tim said this yesterday, but it's probably not something we'd go ahead and give your kids a heads up about unless they, of course, already know about it. And then maybe we talk weather and why it's unlikely to happen now. As we look at satellite and radar, you can see the first cold front that rolls through the area tomorrow. It's still off to the north and west. As it moves through, we are going to see more clouds overnight and eventually that chance for some rain here in the Charlotte area tomorrow morning. Right now, I am expecting our boom or bust to be pretty consistent with yesterday. If not, that chance for 0 is coming up a little bit. So trace amounts again at a maximum. I did actually put these graphics a little bit out of order, so apologies for that. But let's get back to that first system that's coming in. So here's tomorrow morning. We have 4 a.m. areas of snow starting to move into the mountains. They will likely see an accumulation of about an inch or so. It's not going to be as much as earlier this week, but still a nice little dose there of the good stuff from Mother Nature. 9 a.m. few showers here in Charlotte. Notice the temperatures. It is still very, very warm, way too warm for any of that to mix in with some snow or some sleet. And then we actually get warmer before we get colder again. Temperatures will still peak in the mid 50s because that cold front rolls through, yes, but it kind of stalls just to our south and east. So whereas a normal cold front will typically move off the east coast and then dissipate as it continues to move eastward, this one stalls. And that's what keeps us on the moisture side of this, but also what doesn't allow for us to really lock in some of that cold air. That's one of the biggest changes over the last 24 to 48 hours is that cold air doesn't look to be as locked in. So while we look to have a bit more moisture, the cold air has backed off. So here Saturday night, 10, 11 o'clock, notice areas of light rain, a cold rain at that. It's going to be in the 40s, but notice 45, 43, 41, most of that moisture is where temperatures are setting up to stay above 40 degrees. Now, that can sometimes allow for sleet to mix in at upper levels of the atmosphere when you have a temperature closer to 40, but it's extremely unlikely to get pure snow with that because, yes, while upper levels of the atmosphere are still going to be cold, that allows for a lot of mixing out as it reaches the ground. If you're in areas west of Charlotte, the concern won't be as much about cold air, but as much about moisture content. Because again, if we see the moisture along and east of Charlotte, you have no moisture to work with. So if you're east of the city, we have moisture, but not a lot of cold. If you're west of the city, it looks like we have cold, but not a lot of moisture. So here Sunday afternoon, again, we're dry and quiet, but notice we just don't have those two time periods correlating where we have the cold and the wetness at the same time. So this is my latest snowfall map. I have adjusted this a bit to shift a little bit further south and east just to acquire those areas that could be a little bit wetter and spots south and east of Lancaster and Chesterfield County. I did get a text from my friend Linda, who works with the Lancaster SPCA. I've worked with them before, but who let me know that they are brining the roads. I think this is a precaution that a lot of cities take. I don't know if it's necessarily a waste or not. I won't speak semantics on that, but I will say that I am pointing this out to say that if you are someone who is very, very sensitive about your car, I have a few friends like this who, like, the second it gets dirt on it, they have to go take it to a car wash. I myself am not like that. Probably wish I was a little bit more. This is probably going to be a week where next week you're looking at trying to get a car wash, because remember that salt and brine can oftentimes come back up on your car. So just be mindful of that. Apologies for stepping away from the mic. So flurry watch. Yes, it's possible to see some flurries in Charlotte on Sunday. Is it likely? No. Do you need to worry about milk and bread and eggs? Also no. This is the latest from the Weather Prediction Center on our chance of seeing 1 inch of snow in the 24 hours between Saturday and Sunday. And you can see it's less than 1% for areas up in the mountains, which means it's even lower for us here in the Charlotte area. So here's that 7-day forecast from Jerry Hunt Super Center. Again, we're still keeping an eye on Sunday for a few flakes to be possible, a few flurries. Temperatures, though, I mean, look at the low and the high respectively. A difference of 5 degrees from 37 to 42. Again, it's just not setting us up for success when it comes to snow. Do I hope personally that we get a quick little burst at times? Sure. I love snow. Again, I love it. Temperatures again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, going to start to cool off. We will see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all 3 mornings with temps in the 20s. So still probably want that heavy coat for the first half of the week. And then we do see a slight little warm up by the end of next week. I said this during the regular newscast, and then I got an email from someone who seemed to be a little bit confused. So I did say that winter isn't over yet. And they said, what do you mean by that? We're about halfway through winter at this point. So just remember, we get most of our snow in January. So just because we haven't seen it yet doesn't mean we won't see it at all. But in the long range forecast, there is still a lot of cold air in place. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. Timothy Buckley. We're back.
Hello.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. We're back talking about the same stuff we were talking about yesterday and the day before. And we're learning a little more every step of the way, aren't we?
Yeah, but I'm still kind of banging my head metaphorically against the mic because I don't want to break the equipment and get in trouble. But Tim, last night, listen,
Yeah.
I can handle the negativity. That's fine. But I posted that. I know we were texting about this, which is why I'm bringing it up. But I posted that WPC, map that had like the chance of 1 inch of snow in Charlotte, and it was at 5%.
Sure.
And people lost their mind. They were like, everybody else is saying something different, and I was like, I'm just posting an update from the Weather Prediction Center, you guys. Like, we want it to snow just as much as you do.
So they thought the chance would have been a lot higher.
Yes, and I'm assuming that's either because of the weather apps or like I've talked about every single day, it feels like, on the show, but the easy access to those crazy models, because I feel like we can kind of say it now that we are pretty confident what we're going to have. We had the European model basically showing nothing, and Tim knows, at the same time as the GFS and the NAM were showing 3 inches. So this was a very unique situation where there was no consistency at all. Like, these were like on the other sides. It's like you cheering for the Bills and me cheering for the Patriots, which I'm not, don't worry. But I'm saying they were literally on complete opposite sides of the spectrum. So that what made this exceptionally difficult, but I think also people saw those numbers and they kind of just latched on to like those runs that said 3 inches. And so I'm assuming that's what it was, because I didn't see any meteorologists in Charlotte say there was going to be 3 inches of snow personally.
Yeah, I think we're kind of just at the point here, 2026, where you can't really put the toothpaste back in the tube when it comes to bad weather information getting out there, and so it kind of boils down to, if you want a good forecast, it's personal responsibility for you to find a good place to get it at this point, because there are lots of places to get a bad forecast. And a lot of times, if it looks too good to be true, like if there's something 4 or 5 days away and someone's giving you the amount of inches, just ignore it right off the bat. Completely ignore it, because that's not something that anyone responsibly can talk about really until about 2 to 3 days out. And I know that's maddening. You want to plan. You want to know right now. You're going to look and say, gosh, Apple Weather says 5 to 8 inches. Isn't that exciting? It is exciting. It's usually wrong. That's just the way that it is.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit yesterday with the apps. They essentially just take one raw run. Like, we talk a lot about the deterministic, how bad it can be sometimes because it's just looking at initial conditions for one particular instance. And sometimes that's, I remember last year, we really didn't get a good snow in Charlotte at all. And I did a school talk to him like a week before we saw like a dusting, and some kid came up to me and said, well, my Apple Weather app has 9 to 11 inches. And I said, okay, check back tonight, and I want you to email me and tell me what it says. And like that night, it said 1 inch. And like the next day, I think he emailed me back and it said 5. And like the next day, it had 0. And I was just trying to kind of explain the reason why those things are so dramatically different, and why looking at the ensembles, kind of working, going with what the biases of certain models, certain ones that are doing a terrible job. Sorry, American. I called Brad yesterday after the show, Tim, just to make sure we were all on the same page, the three of us, with the snowfall. And I went on a rant about the American. And I was like, Tim and I were talking about this during the show. And he's like, all right. We got it. And I was like, I'm just so frustrated. But I feel like everybody feels that right now.
Yeah, and there are a couple of things. I think, number one, that model's doing worse than it used to, which is one thing. On the other side, though, and I was talking to our meteorologist Alex Williams here in the Weather Center today. He's new to North Carolina. He was working in Tennessee before, and he said, this has to be like a record or something for the models being so wrong for snow, right? Like, this is unusual. I said, no, it's always like this. It's just like this every time.
Yeah.
So to me, this is, it is frustrating, but it's not surprising. Like, we don't get the details when it comes to a winter system until you get a couple days away, which is why the graphic that Brad shows and you show and I show, the one with, you got to wait till those those last couple of days before you fine tune the details. There's reason behind that, and there's some practice behind it. And I was on Twitter today, and it's funny to say, the real weather hounds right now, they're saying, they're sick of this system now because it's not going to be a big deal. But they're already saying, well, look at 10, 12 days from now. It's like, why would I do that? Like, why am I looking at what do I care about 10 days from now, what a model is saying? Now, we can look at a trend and say maybe it looks a little cool, maybe it looks a little wet, but like, lose me on any sort of snowstorm 10 days away. That's just, it's like, fool me once, fool me twice. What are you going to do here? It's silly, I think.
It's so true, and it's like, almost worrying so much about 10 to 12 days away. We were talking about that earlier this week about like the inability to go home and not be looking at models. But you could argue that almost every single winter, every 10 to 12 days, there looks like there could be something. My first chief meteorologist, Ed Piotrowski, he works in Myrtle Beach. If you guys live in the Carolinas, you might have heard of him. Fantastic guy. But he used to, Tim, print out every single time, because this is back, 10 plus years ago. So he'd print out every single time that the models showed a chance for snow in Myrtle Beach, and he'd keep it in like a folder. And then he'd go through at the end of the season and almost like count how many times. And he was like, yeah, this is why, this is why gambling and, trying to predict who wins the Super Bowl is so difficult, because it would be the end of the season. It was like hundreds of model runs showed like 20 inches of snow in Myrtle Beach. And he's like, and we got nothing again. And it's just, it's maddening sometimes.
It is the way that it is in Myrtle. Like, I used to work in Wilmington too. Probably once every 2 or 3 years do you usually get a snowfall. Maybe it could go many more without that. They got more than us last year, which is kind of crazy to say. But we can talk about whatever you like, Brittany. We can talk about this weekend system in more detail if you want. I thought you brought up a fun point, though, mentioning that January can be the easiest time to get snow. That's certainly true for my area in Greensboro. We have 36% of all of our snowfall all time happens in January. So if you're, depressed or upset or whatever about this snow chance not looking all that good for this weekend, just know we have a long way to go. About half of the snowfall that ever happens around here is still yet to come. And so I actually think, February is a good month for snowfall. March can happen sometimes. So even if this storm doesn't work out, and it looks like it won't, I think we have reason to believe that there's a lot of time left. There really is. Winter never ends in January.
Yeah, I'm actually going to make that graphic for Charlotte, but I showed this one yesterday, the 30-year snowfall average for us. This is just for the past 3 decades. But yeah, our snowiest month is normally January, about 1.6 inches on an average year. But like you said, February is still pretty good. It's very very close behind at 1.1. I know we talked about this a few weeks ago, but our technical snowiest day in Charlotte is actually March 2nd. That is essentially historically the day we've had the most snow ever. Not total, but the most trace or more of snow just on a day. So I guess that would make it the median instead of the no, not the median. What's it? Median, mean, mode, right?
Well, if you're just the mode.
Yeah, thanks, Robert.
You're just adding it all up, right?
Yeah, it's like the most common one that comes up. I'm like, what's the other M? But yeah, we have a lot. I mean, it's January 16th. We're essentially halfway through winter. If you think of winter as December, January, February. So.
But and I joked about this on Twitter earlier in the week. It's like I just feel like as North Carolinians, we have a toxic relationship with snow here. It's like we've been, this is like a pattern of behavior where we're almost ready to get hurt again every time. It's like if you hear about a snow chance, you can think, well, maybe this time's going to be different. And then it just kind of goes away, and then you kind of get yourself excited about the next time, and that can happen again too. So maybe we can learn from our hearts here and try to, keep your emotions in check. It's easier said than done, but if you're hearing about a snow chance, just know it takes a while before it can really latch on and be the real deal.
That's what I feel like we were talking about that yesterday with the whole apps and, someone hurts you over and over again and you keep going back. It's why I always say the apps are like a bad relationship. You just keep going back for more, and at some point, hopefully you stop. One thing, Tim, I actually wasn't planning on using this, but I did want to show you because I actually mentioned this to Larry earlier, and he was not surprised by this. So this is over the weekend. I looked at our snow seasons during winter, so essentially December, January, February. So if you look at this and you see the 0, this, of course, does not include that random trace we had on Veterans Day back in November. But so this graphic is the last 10 years. So I included this year just to see everything that's going on. But when I did that 10-year average, I did include the previous year, if that makes sense. So I included 2015 to 2016 just to show you. So 10-year average, 1.74. Okay? So this graphic, Tim, was actually made by Chris Mulcahy, but he hadn't updated it since 2022. So essentially 3 years ago. Do you want to take a guess that 3 years ago, if you didn't include 23, 24, and this year, if the 10-year average was higher or lower, and if so, what was it? Right now it's 1.74.
3 years ago.
So that would have been 2013 to 2022.
I would guess that it would have been higher. Pretty good winners back in the early 20-teens, and I would guess maybe the average would be like 4 or 5.
It was 3.0 exactly.
Okay, so a little higher.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
But still, I thought that was interesting that essentially, going 3 years in the future, of course, then you shave off those previous 3 years if you're only talking about a decade, that had essentially been cut in half. And I know a lot of that is those 2 snowless winters we had, but I mean, that is still substantially different. And so I think even just last year only having 1.2, and then 2019, 2020, we only had 0.3 the whole season. I feel like it's all of those mixed in, right? It's like the 2 snowless winters, the 2 winters we only had a quarter inch of snow the whole time. And then even last year, 1.2 really was not impressive.
It's pretty pitiful. I mean, that's just a really bad string of luck over the last couple of years. And there are patterns that can happen and kind of come and go. You have decades that do better than others, of course, but definitely recent years have been difficult across the Carolinas, but especially for Charlotte. I mean, we cashed in on a couple of storms last year around January, especially, that y'all didn't really get. And that's frustrating. It's frustrating to see, and everyone has memories. If you grew up in Charlotte, you probably grew up with some nice snowstorms a couple of times. And now if you have kids and you're wanting them to have the same experiences that you did, well, you can have a 5 or a 6 or a 7-year-old right now, and what do they have to show for it? It's kind of sad, right? There's just not a lot of snowmen quality snows or sledding snows that have happened, and this weekend certainly isn't going to be one. I think it's mostly a cold rain, don't you?
I think that at a maximum, we're looking at maybe seeing some flurries, but it just doesn't look like it's going to accumulate. I mean, like you mentioned yesterday, we were talking about this. We're in the 50s, literally Saturday afternoon. And it looks like when we get the moisture, at midnight, 1 a.m. on Sunday, our temperatures are still in the 40s. It's like I think that it's cautiously optimistic to say flurries. And I'm not saying that, I'm only saying that to give people hope, but I still think it's worth keeping an eye out for. But I think that will really be the exception, to see a flurry.
It's if you had asked a couple of days ago, 3, 4, 5 days ago, would cold air be the problem? I don't know if I would have said yes, because it did look colder, but we maybe should have seen this. If you look at the position of the high, which we did start to talk about a couple of days ago, the high's not in the right place. The high pressure's not in the right place. The high pressure is not in the right place. As we go into Sunday, it'll be over by Texas and Louisiana. And what you want to see for a high pressure is you want to be able to bring in a lot of cold air. To get it, ideally for us, you would want the high pressure area to be up here in New England. That way it can bring south that cold air all the way through the storm. And we just don't have that right now. So kind of as like a starting block or a building block for a winter storm, the high pressure area is often a little bit more important than the low pressure area for us. And in this case, we don't have that foundation, and so it's really easy to overwhelm the system with some warmth because you're not really providing that cold air continuously. And it's not going to be warm, but if it's 36 outside, even if it's snowing hard, what Brad calls this a white rain sometimes. We got this in Greensboro in early December. We had about 6 hours of snow, and it looked so pretty, and it didn't stick a lick. It really just didn't stick at all. So, and it was because it was like 36, 37 degrees, and that could be what happens on Sunday as well.
Yeah, what is the old saying? It's about forecasting in the Carolinas is cold cold chasing moisture never works out. You want the cold air to be locked in and the moisture comes in second or something like that. It's like it just never works out for us if we're in that position. You'd rather have the cold air locked in and be tracking the moisture, which it did seem like that was what we were looking at earlier this week versus the opposite. But it bit us. It bit us this time.
I know.
But at least we didn't put out a snow
It is
map saying
frustrating.
3 inches of snow last week. So
We didn't. But if you had asked me earlier in the week, do you think you could get a couple inches? Yeah, I think you probably could.
Yeah.
But that's why we wait on those things.
what a wise meteorologist once told me, it's a snow chance, not a snowstorm. Oh wait, that was you.
There you go. He sounds like a swell fella. That's great.
He is a swell fella.
Hey, can I show this? I want to show this. This is
show it.
This is a hopeful part of the program. Hopeful part of the program. Here we go. This is the long-range forecast from our partners at the Climate Prediction Center. So we're swinging for the fences here. This is pretty far away, but the 8 to 14-day temperature outlook. What this is meant to show you is, do you have a better chance to be warmer than average or colder than average? They're suggesting that we have a better chance to be colder than average for the end of the month here. Now, what else is interesting about that is this one. This is the outlook for precipitation. They suggest that we also might have odds of being wetter than average. Cold, wet, those are two things that we would want to see if you're trying to get some snowfall. Are we forecasting snowfall? No, we don't forecast that far away, but it's a trend that you might want to keep an eye on. And another sign, like we were just talking about, winter doesn't end on January 16th. It doesn't end on February 2nd on Groundhog Day. It ends in March. And so we'll keep on watching until then. Kind of in my brain, I always look toward the second week of March is my cutoff point. At that point, I don't have any hope anymore for snow. But until then, we can always keep looking.
So essentially your cutoff point is like storm of the century anniversary, and then after that you're done.
Yeah, basically. St. Patrick's Day at the latest. After that point, no way.
Well, Tim, it's been a week. It's been a tough week of forecasting. I'm glad that you've been here every step of the way. Do you have any last comments that you want to tell peeps about the snow? I'm going to pop up our forecast really quick just for a last look-see-loo in case anybody wants to see it. And, of course, we'll have more updates at 11 o'clock on both WCNC and WFMY. So any last words? We're not done with the show forever. We're just done for the weekend.
Sure. Here in the Triad area, I would expect mostly a cold rain. It could mix with a period of wet snow middle of the morning on Sunday. Don't tell the kids about it. If they see it, that can be a nice surprise. But otherwise, look ahead to the next one.
Yeah, look ahead to the next one. All right, well, Tim, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. At least you don't have to come in on your day off to track snow. And everybody else, I hope you have a great weekend as well. Fingers crossed for a flurry or two on Sunday, but otherwise, stay warm out there.
Oh, yeah.